But my wife, the first time we met, it was a blind date. We got set up, and I remember seeing her name and going, that's different. And I was like, okay, Justin, whatever you do, make sure you don't get her name wrong when you're on this date, because this is a make or break moment. Her name is Cherith, and halfway through our date, I called her Chairlift. Yeah, I called my wife, at that point, was just a girl that I was really interested in, Chairlift. Not my best move. Over the next 5 days, we're gonna be going down a bit of a journey. And you're gonna hear from 5 different people who are gonna be sharing something that God has put on their hearts. Something that God has put on their hearts to share with you, but it's not just for you, it's for them as well. It's for me. Because the reality is, as we grow in our relationship with Jesus Christ, we discover that we've never quite arrived. I can't tell you the number of times that I've been like, you know what, I know this, good, time to move on, and then I go, oh shoot, I didn't actually learn that. So whether you've been following Jesus since you were little, or you're sitting back going, I actually don't have a relationship with Jesus yet, I firmly believe that what God is gonna do in you, through you, and around you over the next 5 days is going to be incredible. And so what I do is I wanna stop and just invite God into this space. Because here's the thing, you do not need to hear what I think today. You do not need to know what I think. You do not need to know what I believe. You need to know what God says is true, because what was true thousands of years ago is still true today. So would you be willing to open your hands up with me? And here's why I love doing this. It's one thing to say, yeah, I'm gonna let go of the junk getting in my way. It's a different thing to actually do it. And so we open our hands and we're demonstrating that we're surrendering our schedules, our ideas, our hopes, our wants, our baggage, our guilt, our shame, our doubts. We're saying, God, I'm gonna let that go for the next 30 minutes and I wanna receive from you. And so God, I pray that with open hands, we would let go of the stuff that we have brought in here, the good, the bad, the ugly, the ups and the downs, that we would surrender that to your feet. And this morning we would hear from you. God, speak to us so that we may go out into our families, our community, this school, and we would demonstrate the love that you have for every single one of us. Pray this in Jesus' name, amen. Have you ever made something more important than it actually is? So I've discovered that the answer to this question is a resounding yes, and the longer that I'm a dad, the more I realize how true it actually is. 2 weeks ago, my son was taking a nap. It takes about a 3-hour nap, and so I knew that was about 3 episodes of this one show on Netflix. I was good. My son woke up 5 minutes early. On the baby monitor, I hear, Daddy, Daddy. I pause my show, I go, oh, you know, I've got 5 more minutes, he can wait. That was mistake number 1, 2, and 3. 5 minutes goes by, the show ends, and I now notice there is dead silence in his room. I open the door, and there he is, standing like this. Which is fine, except for he was covered in something that wasn't chocolate. And here's the thing, I looked at it, I was like, oh my gosh, I felt like I needed to put on a hazmat suit, like step into that room and clean the walls, clean everything. But the reality was, it wasn't that bad. I made it far more important than it really was. It took me 10 minutes, I was good. Last night, I came home from work. I walk into our house and my wife goes, hey, listen, I did something today. It's like, oh no, what did you do? Just come with me, come with me. So we go into my son's room and his crib is now a toddler bed. I'm like, whoa, I wasn't ready for this. This isn't happening. He's not ready to be in the toddler bed. I'm not ready for this yet. It's been 2 years. He belongs in a crib. He can't handle this. And he just lays down like it's no big deal. And inside, I start going, oh my goodness, my son's a genius. Like he is the most intelligent, smartest kid in the world. The reality, he's 2 and this is appropriate for him. This isn't anything super crazy, it's just normal. And yet what I did was make my son seem like it was far worse or far better than it actually was. In 2016, there was a research company based out of the UK, and they decided that they were gonna put a brand new multi-million-dollar research boat up in the Arctic. And they were like, you know what? We need to name this thing. But we just can't have any old regular name. We need a really killer name so they did what anyone would do and they turned to the internet. They said, hey, name our boat. And there was a radio host on a show on the BBC who came up with this great idea. I'm gonna throw out a joke. And he based his joke off of the naming of an owl in 2012 called Hootie McOwlface. He's like, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go off of that. So he submits this idea, and the name he suggested as a joke took off. And it was like the greatest thing ever. Everyone's saying, yes, that's it. Yes, we should go with that. And so they were like, we're gonna name this boat Boaty McBoatface. Multi-million-dollar boat, Boaty McBoatface. See, this research company, they overvalued the importance of the name of this boat, but then they were like, we can't name it that because people will judge us and laugh at us. And so they ended up not using that name. How often do you make something more important than it really should be? 1981, my parents were sitting in a hospital room. The Bears were about to play against the 49ers. The game was at 12:30. My dad turns to my mom and overvaluing an NFL game, he says, hey, Lori, get this kid out soon. And so I was born just before kickoff. And it's in that moment that my parents said the name that I would become known as, Justin Mark Brecken. And for years, people would try to give me new names. See, we put so much emphasis on what other people say in elementary school and middle school. People would call me Nash, JB, Breck, Brex. They would call me Soccer, Soccer 1, sometimes Soccer 2. My uncle, he would actually try to call me just in time. Not a good idea, not funny at all. In the 80s, I wanted to nickname myself. There was this TV show. It was about a guy who looked like the quintessential Italian. The slicked back hair, the leather jacket, the skinny jeans. He rode the Harley like he was the man's man. And I wanted to be known as that guy. I put so much importance and value on what everybody else said. I wanted to be him. And so I walk around saying, hey, call me this. Hey, call me that. The name, by the way, was Booch. Not a good choice, and I'm really glad it didn't stick. But in high school, there was a nickname that did stick. In high school, there was a name that people would call me that to this day still haunts me. There was a name that people would say in my direction that became to define who I was or who I thought I was. See, what I would do is I would step into groups and I would try to be what they wanted me to be, or at least what I thought they wanted to be. And I'd go into a different group and I would act a certain way, and I would act a certain way, and I would act a certain way. And here's the thing. They caught on quick. When I was with the athletes, I pretended like I was an all-star. Like I could do no wrong on the field. When I was with the smart kids, I acted like I was a chess master. When I was with the musicians, I acted like I was the American Idol. When I was with the good kids, I acted like I was a good church kid, Mr. Goody Two-Shoes. But when I was with the bad kids, I acted like I was a tough guy. The problem that I had at my school, which maybe you've experienced, is we didn't have a really big school. And so this group was kind of interconnected with this group. And this group was connected to this group. And this group was connected with this group. And eventually, they all found out what I was doing. They quickly discovered that when I was with here, I acted one way, but when I was here, I acted in a completely different way. And so they started calling me the pretender. Now, as the pretender, I would just pretend that the reason they called me that was simply because I looked like the main character of a TV show called The Pretender. He was a guy that would step into a community completely unknown. He would pretend to be what they needed. He would become the hero of the day. He would save the day, and then he would disappear without a trace. But that's not why they called me that. They called me the pretender because I was fake. I was phony. I was trying to be what everybody else wanted me to be. In fact, I was becoming nothing more than a useless stack of name tags. I'd walk into a group, put on a name tag, say, hey, this is who I want you to see me as. And I wonder this morning, how many fake name tags are you putting on? How many names are you wearing that describe who you are? How many times you step into a group and overvalue the opinion of others to act the way that they want you to act, or to act the way that you think they want you to act, just so you can gain their approval? Maybe a better question to ask is this: who are the people placing those name tags on you? Is it friends? Is it family? Is it teachers? Is it the social media at large? Who are the people that are convincing you that you are something other than who you actually are? Now, one could say, Justin, you turned into a worthless pile of name tags because you just weren't trying hard. No. I was trying incredibly hard. My efforts were just misplaced. Every school day looked pretty much the same. I would walk through the doors of my school. I would pretend to put on a name tag. I would jump into a group, and I would pray that nobody asked any questions. But when they did, which was every single time, I would rip that name tag off. I would eject myself from that group, jump into a new group, and act a different way, hoping that that group accepted me and didn't ask any questions. It was the polar opposite of effortless. It was exhausting trying to be all things to all people. Where do you find yourself pretending to be something you're not? Where do you find yourself elevating the value and words of other people, seeking and craving their appreciation, their acceptance for who you are? Where do you need to find validation that isn't necessarily true about who you are? It doesn't actually have to be this way, though. You and I don't have to live name tag to name tag. See, out of all the name tags that I would put on throughout my high school career, there was one name tag that I would unintentionally leave off the list. There was one name tag besides Justin Mark Brecken that I was supposed to wear, but I never seemed to pick up. I never seemed to put on. I never seemed to address this thing. You can't find it at school. You can't find it on a sports team. You can't find it on the internet. You can't find it in your social groups. You can't find it on Instagram. You can't find it anywhere out there. You can find it, however, in the Bible. And here's the thing. We live in a community, in a society that says, well, just live your truth. You do you and I'll do me. Here's the problem with that. If what's true for me isn't true for you, it's not truth. It's simply opinion or preference. So when we look to other things to tell us what could be true, we're simply looking for opinions of others, and we're elevating them beyond what is actually true. Now, the Bible is broken into two sections. You have the Old Testament and you have the New Testament. Old Testament's all about life before Jesus. And a quick summary of the Old Testament is simply this. God's people, they follow God, they turn their back. They follow God, they turn their back. They follow God, they turn their back. The New Testament is all about the life of Jesus and then what happens next. The first 4 books of the New Testament describe the life of Jesus. 4 different accounts by 4 different people telling the story of who Jesus is, the one who is God's son who left a perfect heaven and came to imperfect earth to be with us. And a guy named John, who had a really cool relationship with Jesus, documented that relationship towards the latter part of his life. And here's how he begins to tell the story of Jesus. John 1:1 says this: in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, when you read Scripture, it is incredibly important to ask questions. And if you're anything like me, you're going, okay, that's cool. What's the Word? 14 verses later, John goes on to say this: the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. In John 1:1, when he describes a word, he's not talking about letters that come together to make a sound. He's talking about a person, and the person is Jesus. So let's go back to the very beginning, because it's always a good place to start. In the beginning, Genesis 1:1 starts out like this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Let's stop there for a second. God created everything. So when God says something, we should value what he says above anything else. No one knows more than God. No one knows more about creation than the one who created it. A few verses down, Genesis goes on to say this. He talks about how God created the sun and the moon and the day and the night and the stars in the sky, the land and the waters, the birds in the air, the fish in the sea, the animals on the ground. And after everything God created, he says, it is good. When you think about creation, have you ever stopped thinking about how big it is? The largest gap between where we sit and the most distant galaxy right now is about 13.5 billion light years away. That's pretty big. So when you stop to think about all that God has created, it is massive. It is beyond our comprehension. And in the midst of all of that, God looks out and says, it is good, but something is missing. And so that's why in Genesis 1:26, it says this, let us create people in our image, in our likeness. You are made in the image of God. You are no accident. And after God creates people and puts them in the middle of everything he says is good, he looks out and says, now it is very good. And when God says it's very good, he doesn't mean very good like we do when we say, oh, that was very good pizza. That was a very good post on Instagram. That was a very good shot. No, when God says very good, what God means is whole, complete, and lacking nothing. I wondered this morning, do you feel whole, complete, and lacking nothing? Or are you looking back saying, you know what? I would be whole, complete, and lacking nothing if I just had fill in the blank. Have you elevated the value of something in your life above what God says is true of you? See, oftentimes we put too much value on what other people say, but don't listen to the one who created everything. We allow the comments of others to become larger than life. We allow our personal wants and interests and preferences to get in the way of what the Almighty God has to say. A.W. Tozer, in his book, The Knowledge of the Holy, says this, what comes into your mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you. What you think about God is the most important thing about you. Everyone has their own picture of what God is like. Some would say he's good. Some would say he's not so good. Some would say he's more important than other things. Some would say that their perception of God is more or less accurate. And the way you develop your picture of God comes from all kinds of places. It can be what mom and dad have said. It could be your experiences in church or what a teacher in science class tells you. It could be tradition passed from generation to generation. It could be from your own friends. It could be from the own research you do. Google it. There's an answer for everything. Louis Giglio, in his book, Not Forsaken, lists out an extensive list of how we can view God. It's not the only list, but it's a good list. We see God as grandpa God, scorekeeper God, cosmic force God, angry God, concerned God, stained glass God, hipster God, buddy God, me God, buffet God, and the no God God. See, with the wrong view of God, we spend our lives running from God, hiding from God, angry at God, disappointed with God, feeling rejected by God, ambivalent to God, worried that we're doing something wrong, and have found ourselves on the opposite side of God and feeling like God just doesn't care. But Isaiah 40, starting in verse 12, asks some pretty interesting questions about God. Who has scooped up the ocean in his hands or measured the sky between his thumb and little finger? Who has put all the earth's dirt in one of his baskets, weighed each mountain and hill? Who could ever have told God to do or to taught him his business? What expert would have gone for his advice? What school would he attend to learn justice? What God do you suppose might have taught him what he knows, showing him how things work? Why the nations are but a drop in the bucket, a mere smudge on a window. Watch him sweep up the islands like so much dust off the floor. There aren't enough trees in Lebanon nor enough animals in those vast forests to furnish an adequate fuel and offerings for his worship. All the nations add up to simply nothing before him. Less than nothing is more like it. So who even comes close to being like God? To whom or what can compare? See, what you think about God is the most important thing about you. So what's the name that God has written on a name tag for you? What's the thing that God describes you that nothing in all of creation can claim? What's the one word that no one can take away? Well, the book of Mark, we see this moment in time. Jesus is about 30 years old. He hasn't done anything remarkable except get lost at the temple as a young kid. He walks out into the waters of baptism. He is baptized, and when he is baptized, the heavens open, the dove descends upon him, and God speaks. And what God says is this: "You are my beloved Son, with whom I'm well pleased." See, what God calls you, the creator of everything, calls you is his beloved. The one he loves. And no one can take that away from you. No post can elevate that. No test can devalue that. No person can take that away from you. You yourself cannot act in a way that will remove this name that God calls you from you. See, I spent most of my life thinking that I could earn the approval of others. I could gain their acceptance. I could gain their approval. And if I did, then maybe I would feel better about myself. If I gained their approval, then I would be a better person. But August 1st, 2008, I had this remarkable discovery. It wasn't about me. I realized what A.W. Tozer said, what you think about God is the most important thing about you. And what I discovered was I was elevating the opinion of others far beyond what I was viewing God's opinion of me as. And it changed everything. I was no longer seeking the approval of others. I began to say, what does God say? God says I am his beloved, then that won't change depending on what circle I'm in or what job I have or who I'm around or what I say or what I do or how I dress. Nothing can change what God says about you. And today you have a choice. You can choose to sit in your chair, to hear what God is saying about you, and to say, that's cool for you. I don't accept that. I actually reject that God cares that much about me. And that is your choice. Or you can choose to embrace the name that God is speaking over you this morning. To embrace that nothing can change what the creator of the heavens and the earth says is true about you. That no test is good enough. No game is bad enough. That what God says will always be true, because what was true yesterday is true today and will be true tomorrow, because God is unchanging. So here's my challenge. Like I said, we're going on a bit of a journey over the next few days. And you can do one of two things. You can come in this room and physically be here, but mentally check out. You can let the words of pastors and communicators from around the community come to you and say, yeah, you know what? God thinks this of you, and go, cool, that's great for you, but I'm just here because I'm supposed to. Or you can listen and show up physically and mentally. You can remove the distractions from your life. You can set those aside just for a moment and hear what the creator of everything has to say about you, because I genuinely believe when you listen to what God has to say, the voices around you become a little less loud. And it will change the way that you approach tomorrow. It'll change the way that you approach your family, your friends. It'll change your motivation when you step into this group or into that group. It will literally change everything. So how many name tags are you wearing today? How many name tags are you putting on? How many of them need to be removed? And if the one on top isn't the word beloved, what do you need to start or stop doing in order to embrace that? God, I pray that you would continue to speak over the next couple of days to my brothers and sisters of North Cobb Christian School. Would you light a fire underneath each student, each teacher, each faculty member, each family that is represented in this room so that we can embrace what you say above what everyone else says? And God, would we remove the distractions so that what you call us becomes the defining characteristic of us, so that we can invite others to experience the same thing. Pray this in your name.